Hey everybody, thanks a lot for joining us today. My name is Phil Strazula. I'm the founder and CEO of Next Wave Hire. And today we have a very special guest with us, Shonda Zilick, who runs employer branding for GE. And we're going to be talking about this trend of recruiting looking a lot more like marketing. Why is this happening? What does it mean for companies? What are some of the best companies doing? And where's this trend going to take us in the future? And we're glad to have Shonda with us because she's kind of one of the leaders in this space. She's doing some really interesting things at GE. Short preface for this talk, a little bit about NextWave. So we're a company that collects employee stories about what's it like to work at your company, really deep, authentic stories directly from the mouths of your employees, who we believe are your best brand ambassadors. And then we take those stories and we put them in your careers page, social media, email campaigns to candidates, basically all the places that folks are going to research you before actually applying for a job. So that's a little bit about NextWave. And of course, if you want to learn more, you can check out our website, nextwavehire.com, or you can just email hello@nextwavehire.com and we'd be happy to chat with you. So Shonda, thank you so much for joining us. Do you mind giving just a little bit of background on yourself and kind of how you got into this line of work?
Sure. How I got into it, I have no idea. But my background actually before joining GE was completely on the marketing side of things. I had no experience in HR, and looking back, I may not want, no, just kidding. HR is a different world, but at the same time, it's really exciting to apply marketing strategies towards what's going on with our candidates. I remember even just in joining GE, one of the GE officers saying, what do you think of this? You don't have a background in HR. And I said, I'm selling experiences instead of products and solutions anymore. So that was kind of my background coming in. GE, I don't know that, I think they were a little behind on the game a little bit for employment brand, and they knew it needed to exist, but they weren't really sure what that looked like. And so it's been quite an adventure over the last 4 years here. I'd say we still have quite a bit of an adventure left in front of us, but it's been pretty exciting just to see how far we've come already.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that about yourself. So I guess to sort of introduce this topic, what does it mean to you that recruiting is looking more like marketing? And I'm kind of like pretty interested to hear your answer, especially coming from the marketing world and going more into HR.
Yeah, I think it goes back a little bit to what I said. It is, we're selling experiences, and I think it evolves with how our companies evolve, but I think it also evolves with what talent's available. It also evolves with what candidates want in life. I don't know, maybe a while back, maybe before any of us were working, people wanted, it was more about a job, and it was a job, and I just was going to have something that went with my experiences. I think now it's a little bit more than that. People want an experience, they want to make an impact. And so because of that, it's become a situation where we're having to sell those experiences. If somebody's spending, a third of their life or whatever it is working their job, and to have an impact, we need to sell what it is that they would be doing and why they'd be doing it. So I think that's why it's looking more like marketing right now. I think for GE, it really, and I think for a lot of companies, it's become almost this perfect storm of why recruiting is more like marketing now. For one, for GE specifically, we're rebranding ourselves as a digital company, and there's a lot of companies I think that are doing that, where they're just kind of making the turn and wanting to become more digital. And so because of that, we needed to make sure that we, again, the whole rebranding of it. But I think the other thing is that candidates want a transparent point of view. They want a story, right? And so it's in selling products and services, that's what we used to do. We used to sell stories, of who's using it, why they're using it, and make people feel like they needed it. Now it's the same thing with our jobs. We're selling those stories. And I mean, we can talk all day about that with employee advocacy, so I think that's why it's looking more like marketing. I think the war on talent is, we've got a lot of people that are happy in their current jobs that we're really wanting as those gold stars to become part of our company. And so we find ourselves needing to sell more than just a post and pray with, the old school method that we used to follow.
Cool. Yeah, it's interesting to think about that transition. And I wonder even if it actually happened, that transition from somebody just wanting a job to somebody wanting something more meaningful. I wonder if people always, kind of had that desire, and now we think about it more because of this like quote unquote millennial generation and like how do we recruit millennials, and then also because of going on in consumer behavior, which is maybe back in the day you used to go into a store and just buy a pair of jeans, and now it's because we have all this information like literally at our fingertips with mobile phones, we can get all this info. Like what do you think is driving this trend? Is it either of those two things, or is it like because now if you think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like, hey, we've got a bunch of stuff met because our society has just gotten to a certain point. So it's like now income, I want it for something else.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think what you were first saying, and even this kind of ties into why it's become marketing, is it's like the sales ladder, right? You make somebody aware that there's a problem. You make somebody, or maybe unaware, and you make them aware, not that there's a problem, but there's better stuff out there. And then why you're the solution for the better stuff out there. And just like you said, we used to walk into a store and just buy the first product. Now we have the availability to go to Amazon and review all competitor products. So I think maybe even jobs are like that. I think people always have wanted to make an impact with what they do. I don't think it just like changed and people used to say, oh, I don't want to make an impact. I just think now we have the ability to do that research and to figure out what that is and why it fits us. And we were talking about this at one point. I don't think we're exactly there yet. I think it's still something we need to work on, even as companies, our messaging to people. And GE is not great at this. I think we need to be better at this. Why do we do what we do at GE? And for you guys, listening in, why does your company do what you do? And is that the messaging that you're carrying out to candidates? Because I think candidates really want to get there. I don't know that consciously they're thinking about it. I think a few times we step back and we have our personal time and we say, what is it I really want to do in life? And why do I want to do that? But I don't think we're great at it as people to do that. We just kind of go along with the daily grind. I think as companies, if we were to be better in our messaging of why we do what we do, we would allow candidates to start thinking that way. And maybe that's where we've come and that's why we're starting to think that way. But we would match up better talent, I think, as well. So, I mean, does that answer a little bit? I don't think people woke up like that overnight. I think it's at our fingertips and maybe just the way we can think through the process now.
Yeah, no, I think you make a lot of good points. The one that stood out to me is that this research now, and it's almost like because we can, there are forces that have been driving companies to do this, and one is that certain companies realize this is a competitive advantage, right? And even a long time ago, like there are videos of what's it like to work at Google from like 2001, where they realized that people want more than just a job, and I think they use that for a really long time, very astutely, to get the best talent. And they also did the brain teasers in the newspapers, or the press-worthy recruiting events at MIT or whatever. And I think that's made their game. And then it seems like the other thing that maybe has made people step up their game is Glassdoor and now Indeed and all these other websites with their reviews. And we kind of have found ourselves in this age of transparency where it behooves you to be proactive about what is your brand.
It's a really good point. When I joined GE, and I probably haven't told very many people this story because it doesn't really paint us in the greatest light. But when I joined, I was looking at Glassdoor, and I think at the time we had close to 200,000 that were looking at us every month on Glassdoor. And, I was just, we looked bad. We didn't own our profiles, oh my goodness. And I went to our leaders 2 different times, and they were like, nope, we're not going to reward bad behavior. We're not going to pay for something that we didn't write, that people are out there talking about us. And I said, yeah, but you have to come to the party where people are talking about you. If you plan to have a say in it, you got to come to the party. And whether it's Glassdoor or other websites, I think as companies, we've realized we have to be transparent about what day-to-day life is. We got to admit, even where maybe we're still trying to figure it out, when it's what it's like to be a part of our company. But yeah, I think that the research drove that probably, right? Or just the lack or the fact that I can do research and I can figure out what the transparent point of view is and not what a company just has to say about itself. But I think we also, as companies, we want to paint a real picture now too. I think we're all getting there.
Yeah. It's definitely, there's definitely the long-term incentive to paint the right picture, right? Because maybe in the short term, like being like, oh yeah, all we do is like hang out and like go to Red Sox games or whatever, like that might get you a bunch of people in the short term. And then you're going to have a ridiculous retention problem in 6 months. So, which is like terrible. So it seems like the incentives there. You talked a little bit earlier about basically hinting at like who owns this in an organization. And I guess there are some companies that have somebody like you. There are some companies that are not GE, most companies, right, that aren't that large or maybe don't have that sort of like existing corporate brand. What are your thoughts on who owns this? Is it the C-level? Is it like head of talent acquisition? Is it somebody who has the title employer branding? I know HBR put out that a couple of years ago that the CEO should own it, but what are your thoughts?
Sorry, my screen just froze, so I want to make sure I can see you. Sorry. It's an interesting question because it's different in every company. I don't think we've landed yet. I don't think there's a right or a wrong, even on it yet. I was talking to EY not too long ago, and their employment brands sit in marketing, and talent acquisition is a customer of theirs. And I think we're all set up a little bit differently. The cool part about it is I'm having these conversations with them and we're having the same problems, or the same hurdles we're trying to get across or the same strategies we're working on. But it's definitely something, I don't know, we've all figured it out. And there's a lot of different factors on it. With GE, there are days that I wish I sat in marketing completely because I feel like they get more money and, it's not based on all hires and, that kind of stuff. So there's some battles I'm fighting in TA that frustrate me. But I also think that if I was just somebody that came from marketing and this role actually existed in marketing, like fully in marketing, then what my in-between is, I probably would have never had an understanding from the talent acquisition point of view. So I think there definitely has to be this, a crossover even of roles, and I don't know that I don't have the exact answers on that. I definitely think it is different between companies. I think you just have to figure out where does it sit to where there can be visibility and respect in both areas for it, and then also how do you tie those two areas together? I think for big companies like GE, some people might think that's easy, but I think it's actually pretty hard. You have these big silos operating, and moving forward at pretty decent rates, and for them to stop and say, let's look at talent acquisition, or let's look at our candidates. It's like turning the Titanic sometimes, and that's what my boss always tells me because I'm always like, things aren't moving fast enough. So I think for big companies, it's hard in one way, but for small companies, it's probably hard too, as far as just resourcing it, so I don't know that I have the exact answers, but I do think it's kind of a mix right now. I think the biggest thing is the understanding and the respect from both sides.
Got it. Yeah. So it's almost like we're not really sure where it should sit necessarily. Maybe it depends on your organization, but it basically needs to be a priority. I'm wondering, do you have advice for somebody who maybe is like VP of talent acquisition, maybe they run a team of recruiters and maybe it's 3 recruiters, maybe it's 300, and basically they're like, hey, we need to do this employer branding thing because we're just like sending emails and posting jobs and our career page isn't that great. we don't have the analytics, blah, blah, blah. They should be hiring somebody who heads this up. Should they be like advocating on their behalf? Should they be getting marketing to do this? Should they go use like an agency? What for them?
Yeah. So, I think that's the other thing, to just even level set a little bit. When I started into this, I know everyone thinks I work at GE and GE has all this money. But in reality, when I started into this, my budget was zero. And I mean, for 2014, my budget was zero. For 2015, my budget was zero. For 2016, I was about at like 50,000 to host my own website with my own internal IT team. Like we don't have a ton of money. In talent acquisition, I think as a whole, unfortunately, that's where we find ourselves a lot. But that's why that relationship is so important with marketing, and as far as advice of where to start, I don't think you have to have a huge budget, and I don't think you have to have the exact right person that has all this knowledge on TA and all this knowledge on marketing. I mean, look at me. I had no background in HR. I think the biggest thing is the partnership and the respect, and the way you do that, if you're a small company or a bigger company, the way you do that is, a couple of different ways. But I think the biggest thing that stands out in my mind is establishing what you bring to the company, and I think right now, again, kind of going back to that perfect storm, all of our CEOs, all of our presidents of our companies are realizing that they don't have a company, they don't have solutions or services or products to sell if they don't have the talent, and the talent isn't even readily available sometimes. We're having to go out and find it, So if they don't have the talent, they recognize that, whether they've admitted it to themselves or outward, I don't know. But I think they definitely recognize that. And I think we have to make a point to be a part of that conversation, and it's just like, I'm sure on the line, people are referencing the GE Owen commercials that came out and the Sarah commercials that came out. Marketing came out with those. I'm not going to take any credit for the perfect storm here, but marketing came out with those, and they came out with it because they said, one, they knew they could brand us in a different light, needing digital talent with having Owen come out. But two, they knew they needed the talent. At the beginning of the year, Jeff Emmett, our chairman, said every GE employee is a recruiter. If we don't have the talent, we don't have a company. He recognized it. And luckily for me, perfect storm, he recognized it externally for me, but marketing then came to us as, that customer saying, we've got to market to consumers. And we're used to marketing business to business, and how do we do that? And how do we incorporate candidates into this? And where do we go from there with it? What action plan is it? And so I think that's the biggest thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a budget. It doesn't have to be the perfect person. But you do have to kind of make your case and be part of that conversation. And I still have conversations with marketing about how, the next campaign to come out of, look, you might think it's a second, thing that, you're gaining off this, but to me, it's one and the same, and we go back and forth on why that is. And we try to make our point. I think the other thing you can do in making your point, and I'll probably always go back to this just because now I'm at GE and that's what we do, but, it always is about the data. It's about, and I think that's the coolest thing about our career websites, whether we realize it or not. If you really look at the traffic to our company's websites, a lot of it are people that are looking for careers, and if they're not paying attention to that and we're not advocating for it, then nobody's taking care of that traffic. And it's a majority of the traffic, and whether it's your career websites or social or anything, showing that data and showing, what impact it can have on the company brand as a whole is important. I remember early on in this adventure, we did some sort of thing where it was like a conservative analysis. If every person that entered an application or every person that was interviewed told about their candidate experience or told about the company to a certain number of people, we were reaching more people than marketing or sales were reaching like any day of the week by far, and I think it's making those cases, and again, looking for that partnership and looking for the respect with that.
Yeah, what's interesting, you talk a little bit about budgeting. Obviously, I think most people have seen the GE commercials, the Owen commercials, and your latest batch that was aired during the Olympics. It seems like what you've effectively done is partner with other parts of the organization, perhaps to get the budgeting resources to actually, go out and do interesting things, whether that's in partnership with marketing or something that you're. Is that accurate? Like how you've kind of gotten resources and kind of grown your team internally?
Are you saying I beg, borrow, and steal for everything I get? Yes. Yeah, and I started, like I said, it just being me, and we didn't really know what we were doing, and we've grown it into making a case for now. We have, I'll say, 4 to 5 full-time employment brand people around the world. And I say 4 to 5 because I think just this morning we found out we're going to get another region. But it's making a case. So 4 to 5 around the world. And then we have a council of about 35 to 40 people. So for the bigger companies out there, they'll understand, the reason we have it set up that way. We've got myself and a couple that are globally representing the one GE look and feel, but then we need to have something down at the local level, whether it's per region, per business. How do we create and customize specifically for those candidates? So yeah, it is a big beg, borrow, and steal, but it's making the case, of what we get from it too. And I always say too, and I'm not great at it. I have a lot of work to do in this area where I just make sure that I show the impact that we're having out there, and with Next Wave Hire, it's employee advocacy. Our brand ambassador program has been huge in this area. It started out, and that's another thing for companies that don't have a budget. And I think this is really where we got most of our our going off into being able to provide an employment brand for free. Was we used our army of volunteers. We used our passionate employees to be brand ambassadors for us. It started out as, let's train the recruiters, let's train the hiring managers, because that's what candidates were seeing. And now we have an army of GE employees that have raised their hand, said, yeah, I'm excited to work here. I want to help brand GE out there. And we have an hour-long training that we offer them, and thousands of GE employees. And so because of that, it took off beyond talent acquisition then, right? Then you have every function out there, or even your affinity networks or your leadership programs in university, and you get people out there representing you all across the company and around the world. And it really grows it for free. Literally, that's our army of volunteers. And with Next Wave Hire, that's exactly what you can do, and then you help them tell their story. We're not great at that just yet. We're still working on that part.
Awesome. What are some of the higher impact things that you guys have done, whether that's on a global level or regionally, to sort of build the brand?
Yeah. And, for GE, we struggle with different problems in different places. In the US, a lot of times it's, hey, we don't make toasters and dishwashers anymore, right? Outside of the US, we struggle just to be recognized as a brand. So we do have different, I guess, battles that we're working on in different places. One of the things I'd encourage people to think about is, what resonates in that area. So I don't know how many global companies we have on the line, but or listening to this, but one of the things that we've recently stumbled upon is, I don't know if that's the right word, but we've recently put some effort into is in China, where are people hanging out, and how can we put that social media strategy together specific to where they're hanging out, and so WeChat is a super app there that you never have to leave. So what does that look like for recruiting? How do we come up with a strategy specific for that and for that audience? And so I'd encourage people to just, some of the things to think about is at that local level, where are people hanging out and how do we contact them? I know when I first started into this, I used to think Facebook was, the old school, not going there anymore type social media. But the cool part about Facebook is everyone's still on there, and you can target ads for a pretty cheap price, so that's the thing about thinking about that. Where is this talent? It's not always about where we hang out every day as talent acquisition. It's where do they hang out? Where do they do their business? And how can we attract them that way? So I'd say those are a couple things to think about as far as quick hits and places to start. I do think the brand ambassador program and providing content for employees to, be able to use on their LinkedIn profiles or different things like that definitely works and makes a huge impact for the brand. I know even just in our efforts with that alone, we saw LinkedIn profiles for our company, and we have a rather large company, but we saw them increase by 50,000 just in 1 year as far as employees having a LinkedIn profile. And again, that's where you get marketing's attention, right? All of a sudden they're like, oh, what do our employees look like? What are they saying about us out there? And so if you can be part of that solution, you start to see that respect.
Yeah,
so a couple of things that might be quick hits or some impactful things to think about.
And in terms of, so you mentioned a couple of things that sort of like galvanize your employee base, whether that's, the brand ambassadors or getting people to sign up for LinkedIn and put something there, which I think the average LinkedIn profile gets like a one view a day. So 50,000, new impressions per day, like that adds up pretty nicely. How did you sort of like communicate this? You mentioned you had a training and a 1 hour training program. How did you get people excited about it? Was there an incentive program?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think a lot of times when we start talking about employee advocacy, we start off with the wrong foot, or start off on the wrong foot. We start off with how this is important to the company, and how they can talk about the company. One of the things we really try to do is talk about branding yourself, and if you choose GE online, kind of that terminology or that word or those words, I guess. So I think that helps in getting the messaging out. One of the things we did that I didn't realize was going to be such a hit was we went through HR and through all our HRMs. We have around the world HR days, like 3 of them a year for GE, where we do specific professional development for HR. And so on one of those days, it was a digital day, and we offered sessions for employment branding for HR. And in doing that, what happened was we had all these HRMs on there that said, I want this for my group, or my team needs this, and we obviously promoted things, not only branding yourself, but also if you have job openings, this is a great place and a great way of how to post them out there, or if you're telling stories about what we're doing in aviation, when you have openings, your network's going to want to join, so I think that's the thing is, one, make it about the employees, but then 2, you can work through different functions that make it a quick hit, or at least making an impact, and spread the word a lot faster. But I also, not to keep on my soapbox, but I also think that partnership with marketing is huge, because they're going to be the ones that do the internal comms and that sort of thing, and make it a part of their priorities, to get the word out to employees and be able to get them on there. I will say we're very, like I said, we're cheap. So we're very manual, and even the process, we have a Monday morning email that goes out to all our brand ambassadors that basically highlights some of the stories that have been pushed out about GE the week before. Like, it's that manual, and we make it so that they can copy and paste it right into their profile, and it looks pretty, and a lot of times it's about a video, or it's something we know is engaging to external audiences. There's obviously amplification tools out there too that you can use. And so that's, another way that you can help with that brand ambassador, is give them the tools to succeed, and I think give them the content to succeed too. So those are some of the big wins that helped us out.
Awesome. Maybe too humbly earlier a couple times, like, we haven't quite landed. I'm curious, or maybe GE is like a little bit behind other companies. What are the companies that you look up to, and what are they doing specifically that you're like, wow, that makes so much sense?
Um, Ooh, there's a couple. Like I said, talking to EY just a couple weeks ago, and the fact that their employment brand sits in marketing. Like I said, I don't know which is right or wrong, but the way that they treat talent acquisition as a customer, and I mean that's their deal. That was a really cool concept to think of it that way. And I mean, even looking at the Olympics recently, they had the triathlon runner, right? Or the woman that was an EY employee. And even in her Olympic interviews, she was talking about her experience at EY and how they encouraged her. And I mean, that's huge, right? And we had Olympic athletes at GE, and we did not do a good job at that, So I think that I definitely look up to some of what's going on there. There's a few other companies, even some smaller companies, and some larger ones, where they're really looking at being dynamic in the content that they provide to candidates. So a candidate comes to their website and they're very dynamic in that atmosphere that they provide to them, where the information that they see is specific to them, and maybe even remembers them from the last time they were there, kind of Amazoning-ish. Is that a word? But Informatica is one I can think of that does that. It's a really cool site. If you go there, it like remembers you. It tells you what positions have come open since the last time you were there. So there's a few things going on out there that I look at, and we haven't quite got there yet. I honestly think there's a few companies where it's respected a lot more, employment brand as a whole, even. Like I said, I'm working on that with GE. I always say we're friends. We're not necessarily holding hands yet with marketing, but I think that, there's companies where they are, like, this is a main objective of their CEO, of their marketing, and so I look to be there someday. One of them was brought to my attention not too long ago, Walmart. Did you see that one? Where they have, yes, like that's a really good, and we've done stuff like that before, but it's never turned out that well. So I thought that was really good. It's transparent. So I think companies that are doing it well, they're transparent, they've got buy-in, and they have those employee stories that just really resonate with people. And I look to be better in those areas in the future.
You think, so you talked about like E&Y, huge company, Walmart, huge company, GE, huge company. Is this something that's only relevant to Fortune 1000 or Fortune 100 companies? VP of talent acquisition at a 200-person company. Is this just like something that really shouldn't be on my radar? Or how do you think about this? Is it relevant for smaller companies?
I think it's relevant for everybody, because I think everybody's looking to spend time at a place where they believe in it. Nobody, and going back to like the first part of our conversation, right, on marketing, everybody's looking to make an impact. So, I think it's relevant to everybody. I was trying to think. I have a friend here in town that has a restaurant, and I was thinking about, like, what is this important to him? And it really is. He wants to make sure that the employees that he's bringing in believe in what he's doing, and it's not just about food. It's about more than that. So I do think it's relevant to everybody, and whether you're where you have people devoted to it or a budget devoted to it, but you at least have to get people thinking this way, and I guess I've said from the beginning that what I do this year is usually what recruiters need to work into their everyday life next year, if I'm doing it right, and I think that's just kind of how it's evolving. So I don't think it's just for big companies, although that's what I mentioned. I think it is something that everybody really needs to think about, and it'll look different for different size companies too, I think, though.
Yeah. And I guess you could almost make the case that it's more important for smaller companies where people, like, everybody matters so much. And as you pointed out earlier in the conversation, talent is what drives businesses and economies and societies forward, right? It's like those right people finding what they're good at, what they're passionate about, and making a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, even with that, I think the more we get into probably the next year, I think you're going to see, hopefully, you're going to see companies come out with more about the why. Why come work for my company? And I think we need to do a better job of that. But I think you're going to really see people come out with that. And I'm sorry, I need to just reset my my screen. But I really definitely think that it's going to resonate more. And so I think even for smaller companies, like you said, in finding the right talent and not having that turnover, they've got to make sure the why is connecting and they're getting the right people in there. So sorry, like I said, my screen froze. So I'm not trying to distract. I'm just trying to see you.
That's called multitasking, doing a webinar and your email at the same time. That would be impressive.
No, I'm not doing that.
So I'm somebody who likes to make like long-term bets. Like I have a folder in my Gmail that's called long-term bets, and I bet people about like lots of random stuff, usually about like technology stuff. So I bet a friend a couple years ago that by this year there'd be like a massively multiplayer mobile real life based game that was worth more than $100 million, like aka Pokemon Go. I bet my other friend that she'd have a baby by now, and I think I'm going to win that bet. So anyways, I just like to try to predict things. I think it's fun. And I know, like before our call, you're like, there's no way anybody can predict 5 years out. And I think that's right. But just for fun, for kicks, we won't hold anything to you. But I'm curious what you think, how you think this trend is going to evolve, recruiting becoming more like marketing, people having your type of title, head of employer branding, focusing more on this. Is this, I mean, the one scenario is like, hey, this only matters in an environment where unemployment is less than 5%. Another is this is going to be more, people are more and more addicted to information, and like it's going to become the status quo. It's not just Google and GE doing this, it's every middle market company too. I'm curious like what your thoughts are, and if you make any specific sort of predictions on the future.
Oh man. Okay, so I do have maybe a 5-year bet that I'll make you, but I'll save that for the end. I think, definitely in the near future, it's more about that dynamic experience that you can give somebody, and like you just mentioned, we have all this information coming at us. I actually just wrote a blog about this, and I'm really trying to streamline my own life. But we have all this information coming at us, and I'm really tending to like, if you can't tailor the information to me, I'm not paying attention to this source anymore, because there's just so much information, and I mean, I even find that with my email, right? If you're just sending me everything, goodbye, and I'm not going to subscribe to your list. But if you're sending me stuff that's specific to what I care about, then okay, and I think we have to get, and let's face it, marketing's been doing this for years. Amazon's been doing a great job of this for years. We have to get better at this in recruiting. And I mean, I'm talking, light years better at it. 2 years from now, 18 months from now, we have to tailor things. And I mean, I just saw an announcement today, maybe it's been out for a couple days, of a big system, I won't say who, but a big system who can now match job seekers directly up to jobs based on their profile, based on data, right? Like, why aren't we doing this? Everything else is based on data, so why aren't we doing this? So I think that, as we continue forward, 18 months, 2 years from now, if we're not able to customize that experience and customize the information we're throwing at people, and I mean, probably not just jobs, right? Like when I post out there about aviation or healthcare or energy, whatever's going on at GE, I want the aviation stuff to hit the people that care about aviation. So it's not just about jobs, it's about all information. We've got to be able to tailor it to who a person is, or we're going to become obsolete and we're going to be ignored. There's just so much information that it's becoming annoying. And if we're going to be one of those annoying voices, then we're not going to be heard. So I think that's definitely the here and now, the near future. And so based on that, my bet I'll make you is that 5 years from now, searching capabilities on our websites for jobs should not exist. That's a strong thing to say. If we can tailor the experience so much, why would I search for anything? Yeah. So, I mean, okay. It's like Amazon, right? I honestly depend on Amazon to target stuff to me that I need or that I've bought in cycle, right? It's like my ClickPick grocery list. They do a great job. I don't have to search for items. I literally go down my list of what I've bought the last 3 times I was there, and I go, oh yeah, we need that again. Oh yeah, we need that again. You know, so I don't know, maybe in 5 years. You told me I had to do the 5-year thing. I think that's impossible, but that's the one I'll say.
Here's a specific bet then. I'll bet you that GE will still have the ability to search for jobs on the careers page in the year 2021, and I'll bet you $100 steak dinner, a steak dinner worth $100 in 2016 dollars. So on inflation, we'll just, you know, it'll be a nice steak dinner. Does that sound like a fair?
Maybe. I was trying to take a bold statement. I don't know that I necessarily believe it. I was just trying to make a point.
Okay, all right.
I'll take the bet just for the fact of, and just, you know, putting it out there. Take the risk.
About the here's for people who are thinking about their own careers. You know, they're a senior recruiter, they're a VP of talent acquisition, they're a VP of HR, whatever it may be. This sort of hierarchy is going to look like in the next couple years. Like, how do I, as any of those roles, basically kind of ride this wave of recruitment becoming marketing and make myself more valuable, more strategic? And is my goal to become head of employer branding? Is it to become, you know, the person who kind of runs this thing or pushes it forward? Or like, how, if I'm thinking about my personal career and just like it very selfishly, not that anybody out there is thinking this way, but hypothetically, nice.
Yeah, you know, and that's an interesting question. Obviously, it depends where you want to go with your career. Not everybody wants to be a VP. Not everybody wants to be in marketing. Some people want to just recruit still, you know. We do have, and I actually just was talking with somebody last week on one of our teams, and she said, you know, how do I get into this? And she has a knack for it. She has a passion for it, you know, and so a lot of what I told her is I said, you know, step back. Instead of evolving the process like you're doing or involving how you're recruiting, step back and act like you got a white canvas and say, I have all these different, you know, channels. I have all these different things that I can do. How would I do this? You know, and I think so many times we get caught up in that evolving the process that we currently have. We forget to step back and say, how would I do this? And so, I mean, I don't know that it's, hey, it could be a make or break for your career development, but I think that's the way you can advance in that area is, and to allow yourself to be creative in that area is to step back and say, you know, how would I do this? And what would that look like? And I think you gain respect from the marketing side. Part of what I worry about with the whole career development, and even for myself, because I am selfish. No, I'm just kidding. But, you know, is I went from the whole marketing side to HR. I do worry that it's going to be hard if I ever wanted to go back to the marketing side of things. That maybe I've been gone from it too long and now I have this HR back. Maybe I'm stuck in HR forever. So I won't act like I have all the answers. I'm sure we probably even have some people on the line that maybe are thinking, hey, I'd really like to get out of HR and I'd like to get into more of the marketing side. I do worry that, you know, unless we have the respect and we make that impact, that might be hard. Or on the other hand, maybe it is the perfect time for that because they're dependent on our knowledge in order to be on the marketing side and to sell the company for its full worth, for its solutions and for the talent that it hires. So, I don't know. It could be the perfect, but I do worry that sometimes it's a little hard to make that transition back.
Yeah. I guess that's the viewpoint of the coming from marketing. I talked to this woman, Debbie Salato, who's the head of employer branding for Citizens Bank, which is it's a 20,000 person company based out of Boston here. She was actually on a panel that we had here in Boston a few weeks ago. And her story is a bit the opposite. She was a senior recruiter. She went to a conference. Somebody was talking about this stuff, recruiting becoming marketing. And this was probably 5 years ago. And she's like, and she went and got a master's in marketing. And now she's, head of employer branding, like running a big team, big budget, things like that, which I think is really interesting. And I guess, from my bias, admittedly, perspective, it seems like most folks who are if you want to be recruited forever, that's a different story. But if you want to be, a more strategic, more senior person, and to start learning more and more about this trend and how your organization can leverage it and drive really the business results, right? The ROI, getting back to the numbers, not just creating like really nice video, but it's like, okay, how did this actually translate into ROI for our business? Because of course that's what the C-level folks want to see, and that's how you're going to impress people.
Yeah. And even recruiters have to consider that, right? If they want to stay and be a good recruiter, they need to make sure that what's going on and, and to have that marketing side in their daily recruiting. Like I said, I mean, if I'm doing it right, what I do today is what a recruiter will do tomorrow. And I mean, some of our best recruiters have really picked up on the social side of things. And when I came here, I think that was like, you mean I can post something I would on social media, so that's come quite a ways. And but I think, even if you want to stay a recruiter, you've got to be able to do it well. And I think that's the way to do it. Sorry, a little bit of feedback.
Well, Sean,
one of the things.
Oh yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you're totally right, and thanks for pointing that out. So thanks a lot for sharing your wisdom with us today, and it was great chatting. I always learn something new.
Me too. No, it's great to have these conversations, and I think like I said, I don't have all the answers. I love having these conversations though, and even having them with other companies to say, hey, what have you learned? What have you learned? What were the hurdles you had and how did you get over those? So I'm always about trying to share out on some of these aspects and just, at least say what I know and what I don't know. So yeah, thanks for having me. And I don't know if we are going to take questions or what that looks like, but I'm certainly open, even if anybody's listening to this. If you have additional questions, don't hesitate in contacting me.
Yeah. So if anybody listening, you've probably been following along on Twitter, #NextWaveEB. The feed's also obviously on the bottom of this page. We'll write up some best practices here, send it to our listserv. But if you have questions, sounds like Shauna is open to answering them. So, tweet at her, get in touch with her. I think we'll end things right now for the webinar. But again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Great to continue to build this community. And of course, one last plug for Next Wave Hire. If you're looking to generate authentic employee stories, you're looking to enhance your careers page, social media presence, sort of use some of these best marketing practices in your recruiting, please don't hesitate to reach out. My email is phil@nextwavehire.com, or you can just email hello@nextwavehire.com. Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.